and also just in terms of your age, your ability to express in certain groups or certain ideas or certain places you find, oh, I'm going to look nice, so I'm going to smile, I'm going to do this, things of this kind. Now I'll tell you another factor that I experienced in terms of that my work was as a waiter in Southern Pacific, and we had service to do in terms of feeding people as a waiter. And of course, a lot of times, people would come on the service, and of course, all the waiters were all black. We first get that idea. Of course, the head man was the steward. He was Caucasian, not until the last part of the dining house service. Now they all mixed up, men, women, and everything. But at that particular time, and especially when we maybe dealed out in New Orleans before, and so some of them would come in from the
which document how Africans in the Nile Valley educated the Europeans through dealing with stolen legacy. The understanding came, if we are to reascend the world stage and take our rightful place around history, we cannot just glorify our past, talking about the great deeds that we once did. We must practice the disciplines that allowed us, that gave us the capacity and the ability to create systems of agriculture, engineering, medicine, sciences, literature, music, religion. All these contributions that make up civilization came out of the African consciousness from the disciplined study of nature and science. And so for one to be able to gain this kind of power, one has to develop a high moral and ethical standard. Because one that does not have a high moral and ethical standard will start to ego trip when they deal with power. And they will start to use power from a very selfish and destructive manner. And so then before one can actually gain true power, one has to first deal with the virtues of ethics. And as they then condition their heart or their emotions, which is equated with walking on water, the whole issue of walking on water is mastering the emotional plane. Then one develops the mental plane. And through studying the 7 liberal arts and sciences, not from the outer, but from the outer, exo, and esoteric inner understanding, one then can pull the veil away from nature and truly see how God or the divine operates in everyday life. And from that understanding, one will then unite with that and start to become an agent of the higher order or the higher mind. These agents were sent out all over the globe, out of the Nile Valley, to start lodges and schools on every continent of the planet. And from those schools or those lodges and the students that came there to gain this knowledge, they became the leaders and both spiritual, civic, scientific leaders of their cultures and rulers, and then nucleated the great civilizations that we know as China, as South America, as the Olmecs, Toltecs, Aztecs, the Taoists, the Krishnas, the Hindus. All those things at their core can be traced back to this body of knowledge. So in that vein, we're trying to expose people to what that information was, and hopefully also motivate you to start trying to incorporate this information into your life so that you and the knowledge become united. Otherwise, it's just intellectual gymnastics or masturbation. We'll continue to be talking, not getting over it. So that's kind of a quick background. My focus is metaphysical or philosophical. True philosophy deals with the ultimate goal of humans to become God-like and reach their full potential. Each of us have unlimited potential, but to unleash your unlimited potential, you have to practice a certain set, certain in the sense that specific types of sets of disciplines, but they have different expressions, like meditation, many forms of meditation. So you ain't got to practice just my form, you should practice some form. You have to practice some form of physical exercise in your life, because you have to keep the physical body disciplined and controlled. It doesn't have to be a specific form, but a form. You have to practice some form of dietary discipline, because humans were not naturally made to be carnivores. I think we're omnivores. I think we eat everything. We eat, I'm just related to my connection to the human family. I don't eat everything. But most human beings, I don't even want to say most human beings, we probably went on the globe. That's right. You know, only the urban dwellers.
That's right.
Or eating all kinds of mess, you know, which they were not designed to eat. So that also has an effect on you. And then you have to deal with your emotional body, because your emotions, the majority of the death and destruction and disease in the planet today is a function of emotions, your emotional nature. You get frustrated, so you gotta fire up, you gotta drink a 40, or you gotta drink a cocktail, you gotta go to happy hour. You know, you got to go eat, you know, because you got all this nervous energy, so you're eating. You got to get in a fast car and move fast because your mind's moving too slow. So you got to go jump off a bridge so you can bounce up and down because you're disconnected. Because people are living externally in the wrong way, so it's creating a barrier to people understanding who they really are. Then mentally, one's mind has to be developed and controlled to where, what kind of thoughts do you think? Energy follows thought, and thought directs energy. So the kind of thoughts that you hold in your mind directs your energy flow. And energy creates electromagnetic force that attracts things related to that energy. So then we attract to ourselves what we project through the thoughts and ideas we hold in our mind. Then, if you learn to control those levels, the physical level, the emotional level, the mental level, which is called the lower mind, or the lower level, or the beast, the lower mind is the beast, 666. And so when they say you have 666 stamped upon your head, what they're talking about is your mind is dwelling on the lower nature. Not that you got some numbers tattooed somewhere in your hand or on your head. That's a story that has a inner truth behind it, that people stop at the story and mix up the inner truth. So once you control the beast, which is a symbol of, if you ever seen the tarot card of the woman holding the lion's mouth open? No, they haven't seen that. Well, if you ever get a tarot card, what else is that's related to that? Well, the Herculean task of killing the Nemean lion. Hercules, the task of Hercules, how he got the big club and killed the lion. Or he had to tame the wild mares. All those things are talking about a human taming or controlling an animal. But it's talking about how the human in you controls the animal in you. And so the animal is your lower instincts for just food and satisfaction and pleasure, you know, revenge or whatever. So it's controlling those things that one becomes a hero or conqueror. So all those, to show you how all these different stories, it's all talking about the same thing. In terms of Jesus overcoming the temptations, right? He went out to the world, he was tempted. All is talking about the same thing, it's talking about you.
Like the Wizard of Oz.
In every story that deals with hero or heroine, you'll see the same story.
It's true.
So then, because what it was, you had 3 people, right? You had what? A lion that didn't have courage, you had a tin man that didn't have thinking, and you had the straw man. Was the straw man that had no backbone or something?
Straw man had no brain.
He had no brain, the tin man had no heart, and the lion that had no courage.
Right.
So he's talking about 3 attributes.
And the wizard with no integrity.
Right.
Right.
Because the wizard wasn't really a wizard.
That's right.
Because he was saying all that was inside of them. Right. So he's telling you the same thing. You're always looking for all the glitter and glamour, right? The big shows, the big cars, we get hung into that. And that's an illusion. So we came through stolen legacy, now we're going up the virtues. So we start off as steadfastness, understanding the difference between the real and the unreal. And again, the real is what? Since y'all went through it. The real, what's the difference between the real and the unreal? What's the real and what's the unreal?
Real is the unseen.
Real is the unseen. What else? Give me some dialectics here. Real and unreal. Should be a list of things that are real, things that are unreal. Right? Go ahead. The real and the unreal. Can you talk to me? Can you?
Okay. Well, the real is what is seen. The unreal is unseen. And so those things that are physical, that you gravitate to, those are the unreal things. And those things that are not seen are the true things, such as the more spiritual, things like that.
But everything physical is based upon something invisible. And invisible is like it's not saying that it's something that's not there. It's just that it's part of it that you don't see or that you don't perceive or pay attention to. Because it is there. And once you develop your seeing or your sight to where you can look in those directions, you can see it there. Because it's there all the time. So the real is the outer. Excuse me, the real is the outer. The real is the inner and the unreal is the outer. So you say the real is the spiritual, the unreal is the material. You say the real is the higher self or the inner self or the spiritual self, and the unreal is the ego or the personality. So it says steadfast is in preparation and readiness for initiation. And so what is initiation? We talked about that. You're going to be steadfast in your readiness and be prepared for initiation. What is initiation? Test. Yes, it's in there. What is initiation?
It's the passage.
Yeah. To what?
From one level to the next.
Right.
So from the lower to the upper level.
Right. We say it's a spiritual and psychological rebirth. In terms that Stolen Legacy talks about initiation. Initiation is a process that one goes through to transform themselves from a mere mortal to immortal, or your higher consciousness, or to your spiritual realization, or your total human potential. You know, all those things are the same thing. So that's steadfastness. Second was fidelity, faith, faithfulness. We talked about fidelity in terms of electronics, and how fidelity related to how accurately you or things duplicates sound or vibration or energy. So we say, well then how faithful are you in reflecting your higher energy? Is the sound accurate or is it distorted? So after faithfulness, we went into devotion. Devoted to a purpose, which was last week, or goal. So then what is your purpose or your goal in life? Are you conscious of it, or was it something that was just given to you, or something you saw something out there that you like, so you're going for it, but you really don't understand your deeper purpose in life? What is your spiritual purpose in life? Everybody comes with a spiritual purpose, which means you have a job. Everybody was called here to do a job. What's your job? If you don't know what your job is, how are you going to prepare for it? And then you may be preparing for it because you don't look at the inner, you miss what you're being prepared for. Because all along your life, things happen in your life that prepare you for something. And life keeps trying to wake you up. But if you constantly look at the unreal, the outer, you keep missing the point. So that's why it's first is you got to understand discrimination between what's real and what's unreal. Because once you look at that and start to reverse the way you look at life, everything is a message. Everything. Conversation you had, people that come into your life, everything. If you just can look at the inner part and not the outer. Because on the outer, something may seem to be bad or negative or disaster, but internally, it has a purpose to it. The stuff that's happening in Oklahoma and all that stuff has a greater purpose than just the physical, because energy cannot be created or destroyed and changed in form. Even though emotionally we get all tragic about it, and that's human, but it's higher forces that are operating. And so then, don't get lost in the emotions, but keep perspective. That's why they say you gotta learn how to walk on water. That's why you maintain your balance. You see, because all kind of emotions, also going to be all kind of, it's going to intensify. All these disasters are going to intensify because we are in alignment. You know, it's like you walk slouched all day. You know, at the end of the day, you're going to try to, your back going to be hurting. You keep doing it for years and years. You're going to be stuck like that. Like, you know, people who have their leg or arm broke and it gets put in a certain cast. And it gets locked a certain way, especially if you don't get it properly treated, and then it heals back up or locks back up in that position, and you can never straighten your finger out anymore. Because it's out of alignment. If you got to put it back in alignment, then it would work right. So that's where we are in terms of society. So all the stuff they're trying to make us like get back in alignment. Like I used to take martial arts, and they have you do different techniques. You know, you hurt yourself doing it. But then what that did is made you do it right the next time. But you don't want to get hurt again. So your body made you get in alignment with the movement. Unless you like pain. So that's what's happening in life. So that's devotion to a purpose. What's your purpose? We talked about your birth sign, your sun sign, your natal sign, your decanate, your Herculean tasks, as tools to help you identify what your spiritual purpose is. What is the lesson that you came here to learn? What work did you come here to do? So now we're at fortitude. It says to be free of resentment. That's the short of it all. Can you be free of resentment, period? Resent going to work, resent what you got to eat, resent what you don't have to eat, resent your car, you might resent your marriage, you could resent where you live, your time you live in. A lot of people resent being in this time. And so as long as you hold resentment, that energy then is the energy that you are projecting. So that's what the universe gonna feed that. The universe feeds whatever you put out. It ain't like God is saying, oh, you really don't mean that, so I'm not gonna take that serious. Whatever you projected out there, the universe is neutral. It's just gonna feed it. So that's what you're gonna get back. So, fortitude. To be free of resentment of the experience of persecution, but victory over self. So we go into the exoteric. Here's the persecution, victory over self. Says look into anger. Anger is being freed from resentment is the other side of being angry. Because people are angry because they resent something. So then, to not be angry, you have to be free of resentment. So to be free of resentment, you got to like be able to think about it. You know, you just can't react. We talked about last week we talked about how the issue of karma and how people have an instinct to respond in kind. Was it this class? Did we talk about that?
I don't.
We touched karma, but I don't think we got into
that. Okay. So fortitude deals with strength. Strength of mind that enables a person to encounter danger or bear pain or adversity with courage. The key word here is strength of mind. It enables a person to encounter danger or bear pain or adversity with courage. So fortitude deals with strength. So I do is I go into the thesaurus and I look up synonyms for fortitude, which deals with patience. But you deal with a lot of people that are hard-headed or stuck in their ways, and especially when a lot of people first start becoming conscious, they be really fired up, you know, and they want to transform the world. They want everybody to understand what they understand. Everybody you talk to, you know, you're trying to break them off and, you know, get them to really understand your point of view and the error of their ways, and you get highly frustrated with people because they don't understand the error of ways, your point of view, and then it makes you get upset. So that's a typical process that people go through. And the thing that you need to understand, one, is it's a typical process they want to go through, and they're new to it, and they all hype it, they want to share. But then you have to remember is first of all, you can't make people change. People have to be ready to change. And conditions prepare people to change. Because you can bring somebody the truth at one point in time and they won't even hear nothing. So you bring them the same truth at another point in their life and they'll be open to it. It was the same truth, but they weren't ready for it yet. So you have to be conscious of where people are at. Because you can't come from your reference point, you got to come from where they're coming from. So that's the only way you're going to be able to communicate to them. Otherwise there'll be barriers to put up. So freedom from resentment. You think these people are still holding certain ideas from the oppressor or oppressive state of mind? So in one sense, they're like in a line with the enemy. I mean, you know, your mind can start rolling with all that. And then you get upset because you want to change. So have patience. I say this because of the issue, fortitude deals with patience. So it means you should be patient. You also will go into persecution under your own mind will try to persecute you. Because if you start to try to change, your personality or your outer mind is going to be challenging you with doubts and apprehensions and fears. Is this really what you want to do? Because you've been so conditioned in one way of thinking that you're going to confront your own self. So again, I said to be patient, because you know it's not going to be one day you come into the knowledge of how to live and then you're just going to drop everything the way you used to live, and it's going to be perfect. It's like sine wave. It's up and down. Some days it's great, other days it's not great. But although this day is not great, you know it's going to be another day where it's going to be great again. And it's just the way life is. So the thing is, just have patience and to go get hungry at the moment. So strength, patience, willpower. That's really all I want to get into today, is talking about strength of mind and willpower. So in that light, I made 15. So some of you guys, a couple of you should already have some of this. These are the stuff on psychosynthesis. So if you already have it, but the other folks get it. You should have it, because you made those classes. What I'm handing out here, I have 2 handouts. They come from this set of books. One book is called Psychosynthesis by Robert Aggioli, and it basically deals with the process of transforming oneself from a fragmented individual to a whole individual. And understand the dynamics and the process that one goes through to synthesize themselves. Synthesis is to bring everything together in wholeness. So the process is one, understanding that you have various aspects to yourself. Understand what those different aspects of your personality are, and then how do you gain control of those different aspects of them under the guidance of your true self. That's what this talks about. And this is another book that's a kind of a companion. It's called The Act of Will. And this basically talks about how to develop the will. And there's different aspects or attributes to the will. The will operates on different levels. And so first of all, are you aware that the will operates on different levels? And then what are the characteristics of those different levels? Because those different characteristics you use at different times. The whole thing that we're trying to do is develop consciousness, as opposed to us just being like automatons or like just automatic. We have to develop consciousness to where then we become in control of ourselves. And then we can choose the most appropriate behavior for the situation. And so that's really what the whole thing is about, becoming conscious. Consciousness. Yes.
Is will, is it a spirit or is it soul?
Will, will is an attribute. Will is an attribute or quality of self. Will is that part of self that is able to direct energies. So the will, the self is the perception. The will is the instrument or to actualize what you perceive. It's like you perceive you want to get up and walk. You can sit there and perceive that all day. But until you will it, until you initiate it and carry it out, it don't happen. The capacity to carry it out is the will. But the entity in the driver's seat is the self. But then the self can be usurped or overridden by the personality. Because we think we have 2 selves, right? An inner self, outer self, a personality, or inner self, or whatever, however you want to define it. I don't want to get too far anyway, it's going to raise it up. The personality is constructed. When you were a baby, when a baby first comes, the baby is pure. It has its own natural tendencies. It wants to be. But then things around the baby starts to mold the baby. Don't do that. Don't do that. Some babies could maybe be, some babies may be a natural athlete or a natural gymnast. So they got that energy in them. They want to bounce and flip and jump around. But because we're like, oh no, don't do that, don't do that, we start to limit that baby. Create fears in that baby. Because we don't understand. Or a baby might be a natural artist. Come out, everything picks them up, just drawn on the wall. Don't draw on the wall, stop doing that. So you're like, stop. It's like, ooh, nigga, so drawing is, Pavlov, conditional response. So then every time you go to get some color, I got hit. So it's like, I don't know, I better channel that. So then you're like, I got all this energy, maybe I can eat. Or maybe I can nibble on something. Its energy cannot be destroyed, only change in form. So then what's acceptable? Well, if drawing is not acceptable, what's acceptable? So whatever your environment is, it has acceptable behavior and unacceptable behavior. So then what happens is you start getting conditioned to conform to whatever is the acceptable behavior in your environment. And that's your personality gets built.
Like smoking weed or drinking?
If that's the acceptable behavior, yeah. Because people want to get strokes. They want to be stroked. And a stroke can be positive or negative, it don't matter, because it's still attention. And humans need attention. Like they had the studies about those babies that were in orphanages, that they get attention and they died. Just because they weren't held and had a contact. human beings are social entities. It's a fallacy to believe that human beings are just separate. Human beings are social. So they have to have social interaction and relationship. And then a baby or kids is monkey see, monkey do. Not monkey say, it's monkey do. So parents might be saying whatever they're saying, but what they're doing is what they're going to pick up. Even if you are in an environment, if you say you don't like somebody, you're still going to pick up their attributes if you're in that environment. Because your conscious mind is molded by experience. So whatever your experiences are, that's what molds you. That's why if you understand people, understand the experiences, you'll understand them. And that goes right back to freedom from resentment of the experience of persecution. If humans are born pure and are molded in terms of their behavior into the negative, then their environment and their experience is what creates that negativity. So that if people are acting negative and crazy, you have to look at their experiences that molded them. And if you want to change them, you have to change their experiences. It's the only way. Talking and all that, if it's a part of the experience, it'll work. But just all somewhere talking, ain't gonna do nothing. You have to change the actual day-to-day experiences that people are encountering and interacting with. I told you guys last week I made copies. I'll try to get copies from the next class of the test scores from the state in terms of the educational scores on reading, writing, and math. Now, test scores in the inner city schools where all the black and people of color go is under the averages or the 20s. Averages. Some of the schools have single digits. 7s, 6s, 5s. Some schools got 0s. It's elementary school. Some high school. Then you go to Beverly Hills and Granada Hills and there, and they got 70s, 80s. All of them over the 50 percentile. So what is that going to mean? If I can't read or write, and I get into an environment that calls for reading and writing, and I can't do it, then what am I going to do? I still need strokes. If I can't get it through positive, then I'm going to get it through negative. Because I still got to get strokes. Human has to have it. And then also in terms of options into the future, they are being conditioned to be have-nots. Well, yet the society said to be, you have to have. Well, if I don't have the positive characteristics to have, then I'll have to use all I have without the negative qualities to have. But I'm still going to have. So it's a setup. And the psychologists and the sociologists, they know all this. It's no big secret. Yeah.
To balance that out, because there is the dialectical approach to everything. Throughout history, the have-nots have more children than the haves. We're coming to a point in history where the people who have had the most materially that has ever existed in history have achieved the lowest level of fertility that's ever been recognized in history. So again, the dialectical approach even encompasses a seemingly perception of those without education and of course the benefits, social benefits afforded in a society as this, afforded to those of privileged education are literally breeding themselves out of existence.
Right. So then continue that scenario, as you then see this groundswell of have-nots starting to surround you, then if you visualize yourself or identify yourself as being separate from them, then you're going to create conditions to protect yourself, which then will be to try to eliminate or control the horde, the masses, to contain it. So then as you move to try to contain it or limit it, you're actually going to precipitate or create the conditions for it to explode. And that's what's happening.
So when we look at racism here, just to backtrack just a minute, are we talking about something that's genetically determined, or is this something that's
Racism?
Yeah, I mean on a global level, or are we saying this is taught?
Racism?
Right.
Yeah.
Or is it something that they're just born with?
No, it's conditioned. Everything. Humans, it's conditions.
It's something they learn
Conditioned
through
response.
repetition.
You can take white kids right now today, if they grow up in the hood, they'll have a totally different orientation.
Act just like you.
No, I don't think so.
Yes, we will.
They may try, they be perfect.
No, the key word is that.
I'm saying those
It ain't exactly the same, brother. It ain't exactly the same.
It was a study did in penitentiaries that if you put a white boy in a cell with all black males, he'll act black. He may not be able to change his skin color, but he'll act and talk and pick up the mannerisms of black. But if you take a black male and put him in a cell of white boys, all the white boys in there will act black.
That's right.
Black is the dominant color. It sticks out. You cannot avoid it. Even if he sits and be quiet, they sit and be quiet. What is he thinking about? I mean, this is studied now. I'm serious.
You're right. I understand.
You have so much power, it's unbelievable. And the people in the know, like you said, are afraid of it.
Well, that kind of takes me back to my original question now. Are we talking about something? Now, when I say racism, I'm talking about the sense that Dr. Wilson or Neely Fuller described racism. You know, operating in 9 major areas of all people activities, right? So are we saying that these people are programmed from a young age to act and respond, and the way they deal with us,
That's correct.
in a particular manner?
Yes.
That's correct.
It's
conditioned.
It's conditioned.
Because in order for you to have an upper echelon and a lower echelon, they have to justify their position.
Say you're right.
So if you're down here and they're justifying their position to lead you and you accept them without even questioning where you come from, you just go along with the game. But if you're able to, do some crucial investigation of where they come from or where they got what they got to enable them to get to that position, you say, huh.
I just have one question. Basically, just to piggyback on what you said, because we hear the Euro line all the time about the great debate.
Right.
Is it genetics or environment? Now, because we're
That was my point.
I know that's the point I think that you were saying, but now because we're dealing with on the metaphysical tip, dealing with the Egyptian mystery system, and not looking at Europe, not looking at Young and the rest of the European sociologists, and the African tip, are we I think you already answered the question. Is it a consciousness thing dealing with our environment from an African tip, or is it really a genetic tip? Because are we going to really go out there and really protect our community, provide for our community because of our race? Or are we doing it because of our environment? So I'm just curious, from African tip, is it different from where the Europeans see the great debate? Because this is a great debate that they've always had.
Because that's where I was going with this too.
So what is the debate? I'm trying to get, what is the question?
Okay, well, let me rephrase the question.
You say, is it environment or is it genetics? Genetics is an expression of environment.
Right. Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
I was getting at
Because
question
the
of,
human organism adapts, is an adaptation to the physical conditions.
Right.
Because at one point in time, black people didn't exist in this form.
That's right.
As humans didn't exist. At one time, the solar system didn't exist. And the planet didn't exist. And it went through a process of gradual formation and transformation from a mineral to a vegetable to an animal to human kingdoms populating it. And then each of those kingdoms then had varieties of versions of itself. And then through survival and evolution, really survival of the fittest, things got weeded out. As the things transformed, those that couldn't adapt died off, and then other things mutated and evolved. So everything is a function of environment.
Absolutely.
But now you're talking about behavior. See, which is what he's talking about when he's talking about racism. That's
see,
behavior.
See, well, that's a function of environment too.
That's true, but that's taught. The behavior is taught now. That's not a genetic carryover. See, the genetic imprint of your environment is on and passed on to
Well,
offspring.
the thing I say in terms of Europeans, though, is the biological lack of melanin creates a tangible barrier with the invisible
Well, I think you're right. There
that
is a
can be
predisposition.
overcome through reconditioning of mind.
Mm-hmm.
It can be overcome, but the natural tendency of the masses is not to look at the world that way.
Mm-hmm.
That is both and the thing is, the evolution of the species or the strand of humans as Western Europeans, the environment that created the biological reaction or transformation also created the cultural expression.
Yeah.
They go hand in hand. It's just like African American people, the evolution of Africans from the Twa and just being very basic to high culture was various phases. And as consciousness evolved, the human organism was evolving and consciousness was evolving based on experience. When our experience was short, when our experience was very short, we pull the timeline out, right? But if you go all the way back to the beginning when human beings first started being aware, they only had a very limited amount of experience on the planet. So the database was very limited. So they looked at the world in one way. So as now they started watching herds go by and seeing things grow and things die and things flood and stars rise and stars fall, they start seeing some patterns. Yeah, patterns. Oh wow, yeah. At night it gets cold and then the light it gets hot. You know, in the dark I can't see and I'm in more danger because they got the predators out there that can leap on me. In the daytime I can see them better. So then I'm starting to attribute certain things with night, certain things with day. You know, the female acts this way and the male acts this way. But then there are other female type things in the world, so I label them women or female mother, and there's other things that are masculine, like I label those men or masculine qualities. So I start seeing the world and identifying the world through these basic patterns.
so how would you relate that? Or since we're talking
racism?
Well, not only the racism, but like the test scores on, you know, the youngsters coming up now.
Consciousness is reality. Energy
Since we
follows
talked
thought.
about-
Where is the energy of our kids focused on? Is it on reading, writing, and math?
Go ahead.
Or is it on rap playing?
Go ahead.
Since we talking about,
And even that, even math and science is in there,
Go ahead.
Yeah.
but are we translating the experience with a math science reference point?
we have.
And so it's on us. I went and picked up, after that I went and picked up, you got a question.
It's
I went and
definitely
picked
on
up
us.
on Malcolm's piece, By Any Means Necessary.
Right.
Because in that book he outlined the basic principles for the organization of Afro-American unity. And all of us is talking about Malcolm and X and Malcolm X, Malcolm X. But we're not dealing with his last legacy. His last legacy was the doorway that we must go through if we're going to achieve liberation. Because he developed a program for community-based empowerment. So you need to read the writings on the organization of Afro-American unity. You talked about political organizing, block by block. You talked about where black people live, they must control those institutions. You can't control those institutions by just raising a sign and talking crap. You got to organize, you got to manage, you got to administrate, you got to have some discipline. And the major problem that we have today is we do not want to take the responsibility for our own existence.
So we lack discipline.
Right. We're spoiled. The whole thing about welfare, it ain't just people on AFD. It's all of us.
That's right.
Because we have become so pampered that we now have given up our responsibilities to the system, be it the political people, the social people, the electric company, whoever. We're not actively involved in what policy and procedure was going on in that stuff. But yet we constantly complain about what's happened to us. Well, how are you going to change it? You know, that's the mythology of the Christ. All of us say we don't believe in Christianity. Bullshit, you still do. Because you're still waiting for something to come from somewhere to save you.
Teach.
Because if you didn't, you'd get out there and save yourself.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said it, because I just finished reading A Taste of Power, and it talks about the organization of the campers and stuff, and them owning their whole thing. All of, just having their hands in everything. Why?
Young bro was the one that really...
The women, right.
Right. And what messed it up?
The men.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
The ego trip. It was
That's
ego
a fact.
trip.
Okay, but we should look at that as an example and get past that.
That's right.
That's right.
So are you still saying we're ego tripping off the men and the women,
No,
not
I'm not
the
saying.
power
I'm just
struggle
saying what
thing?
happened to men. I'm not saying what's
Okay,
happening
but it seems like we should be able to use that as an
now. We should,
example.
but our people, first of all, two things have to happen. One thing that is our major problem is we have to define geographical location that we're going to struggle in. See, right now, black people are just kind of like nebulous. We're not focused on geographical location because we haven't claimed land. Until you focus into geographical location, then that gives you criteria for change because it's no longer intellectual. If people, like I say, if we look at those test scores, and what we're going to do about it, you got to pick some schools that you're going to change. And then if you change the score, then you're doing something. If you don't, then you're not. So what I'm saying is, okay, you're here at the Long Beach African Study Group. Then the issue should be is how can we make the Long Beach African Study Group the best cultural center that can possibly be.
That's right. That's a big thing. That's right. He's telling the truth.
And then the good contribution can I make to make that happen. If each individual made that commitment, that I'm going to make a contribution to build this pyramid, right?
Right.
And so as opposed to me watching and waiting to see if it's going to get built, I'm going to jump in there and give them a hand and build this darn thing.
That's right.
Now, the other part,
it's moving, the basket's moving now. We need more in the basket. We need more in the basket. We need some dedication.
But the other part is you got to deal with, you have to deal with principle management.
Talking about that.
Principle management. The major thing, and I deal with management in my work, and the major limitation that black people have is personality leadership.
Yes.
We operate based on personality as opposed to principle.
Yes.
That means if a person has position, that position should be defined and it should be evaluated. And if people are not doing a good job, then they either got to get training to do it well, give them a chance. If they don't, put them in another position.
That's right.
It's just like when you go out and you play softball or something, and you're on the field, you gonna want to get the people who can catch the ball and hit.
That's right.
If you put you out there left field and you drop too many balls, well, we're gonna try you over here. And then if you can't catch over here, then we're gonna try you over here. Then maybe you better be water boy or cheerleader or something.
Put them in right field.
If we want to win.
Right.
Now, if we just out there having fun, just doing whatever, it's cool. Everybody can do whatever. But if we want to win, we have to equal the playing field.
Do you think people are willing to submit themselves to like a leader that's going to organize?
Really?
Or we got a lot of chiefs and not enough Indians?
You have to look at the specifics. You have to take specific situations and see what it is. You know,
I would think it's submit.
But, you know, another thing you have to understand is too, if you look at nature, each predator protects his territory. You have workers, you have people who build, you have people who go out and scout and hunt. You also have people or insects or animals in that group that just protect. That is their job. They just protect their territory. Like you have corporations, they try to infiltrate everybody else's secrets, but they protect their territory and try to take everybody else. I think that's human.
Take everybody else. I don't know about all that.
I mean, try to take it or seize it and control it. Whereas in the black community,
they try to take everybody else. You know? Because usually what happens is you have a market,
right,
and then you may want to define what percent of that market you want to control. You know, now you could if those who try to control the whole market. You know, you got those.
Oh yeah,
that ain't the norm though.
Right, right. That's not the norm. But you do have those that want it.
Right.
So what I see in the black community, we may, you know, begin to build, but we don't protect it. With our blood, it's like, oh, they come to take it all away. Ain't nothing we can do about it. Instead of like, okay, life or death, whatever comes, I'm gonna stick with it.
Yeah.
But that goes back to what he said about you have to pick the location or the territory. You have to lay a claim on something.
Right.
And then you can defend that. But if it's a random thing and if we spread out all over and there's no coordination or coalition, then we have no strength. You know, and then we're right back where we started from. You know.
But all that's a part of management. Because as you identify the conditions, then you have to take into consideration all those things that will limit you from achieving the goal. So if you know that, you know, you got to deal with finance, you got to deal with physical structure, you got to deal with public relations, you got to, you know, all these things. You also have to deal with defense. That can be from a legal perspective, it can be from a political perspective. You know, so that gets into the question or the issue. That how I got to here was, I'm trying to work my way back here. We're talking about karma and conditioning. That's what it was. I started talking about environment and experience being self. Then talking about how we got to change experiences because we now are victimized by our own self. Sure, the system is designed, but it's enough of us that know, that can deal with it. Just like your brother said.
That's right.
One brother or one black person can be the power of 10 other kind of folks.
I've seen it.
Because the kind of energy that we have, we kind of, that's who we are. We're seed people.
Right,
That's right.
I agree.
But unless we recognize that, we then don't operate like that. And so, anyway, that's how I got to talking about experience, and then that got me into just seeing where we are. And I had a conversation on the weekend about how it's time to really start taking care of business. And when I went back and reviewed the piece, it just verified, you know, the whole issue that we are the solution to our own problem.
Yes, for real.
Right. And so, the question is, what are we going to do about it? So then what you do is define what are the problems, just like you say here, becoming the center. What are the major problems that's being confronted by the center? Let's take it for an example. Then that needs to be defined and become clear, and then what can we do to start resolving those problems? And so, and it goes back to fortitude. Because fortitude, some people, you're going to meet resistance.
Yeah.
Because all of us come from all kinds of different backgrounds. And so, what you want is everybody to understand and disagree. And, you know, that's the way you would like it. That's the way it's going to be. Because if you probably took the median age, and the median age is probably 32. So you're talking about 32 years of different types of experiences. Different insights on religion, about love, about relationships, of different, you know, identity of man and woman, and we take stuff for granted.
But I think if you have a strong leader, the people will recognize that and be willing to follow them.
Yes.
And accept that this person has whatever experiences it's going to take to move us forward as a group.
Yes.
Did you kill that leader that ought to go?
Yes.
Well, but the leader has to have a plan.
Well, from experience.
You have to have leadership.
You have that leadership.
Right.
Yeah.
And a true leadership, you have a person that may have a vision, but without them captaining those lieutenants, it don't work.
That's right.
Like King, the thing that made it work was the lieutenants.
Yeah.
Right. The field general that he had around him that didn't get no play.
That's right.
That really was the force that made it work.
Yeah, some good ones.
And the thing is building a team. Right. I think I was talking to the brother Hosea Williams,
yeah,
who was the field general for King.
Yeah.
And he said that the major thing that their success was the team. The different people that they had that gravitated around King, each of them had different attributes that made the whole successful. Some could really deal with the hardcore people in the street. Some could really deal with the political people that could speak eloquently. Other people were very organized in terms of being able to deal with the church groups. Other people could deal with the youth. And then it was how all of them worked together. And he said before he died, he told them, whatever you do not break up.
Don't break up.
And then right after, a little bit after, I think, Andy Young, was it Andy or Jesse?
All of these.
Well, that was,
each one of them went off and started their own.
Abernathy. They put Abernathy
all
in charge.
of them are still here today.
Yeah.
But they all right, but they're all out doing separate
That's right.
things.
They put him in charge.
Think what kind of power would happen if they still had been functioning together.
I mean, the same vision that
Right.
King had left.
And they each
Right.
lost individually too.
Right. And that's the failure. That's just exemplifies the failure of us all. Because like right here, if you got a coalition of people to focus their attention on some common goals, you create magic. And then you multiply that, then you say, okay, the LA group and the Long Beach group, that type of thing. So anyway.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm trying to get this point in for a few minutes.
Your patience.
Well, also, I find myself...
Did you feel resentful and persecuted?
It's just I find myself in that seat so much. I like to, it's reciprocation. I like to be treated the way that we treat others.
Yes.
Yes. I'll patiently leave the hand up here. But going back to his original point, and I think this brings us back to the point of discussion. So often we're caught up in the perception that the real contest is about race. As technology has changed the world and as we have communication, the concept of race will begin to dissipate, as it was a false concept in the first place.
Right. That's true.
Because how do we define race? Is it genetics, straight up genetics? Well, then we have to throw that one out. I personally am convinced, and I've recently published a paper, Kwesi can attest to this, that the clash is really about civilizations. And one of the things, when we look at Africa, why Africa is in the sorry state that it is that African leadership has bought in on the concept that they are Western civilization-oriented type of leadership.
That's right.
And so we can even look at the institutions that we have controlled, to some extent controlled of our own. An example is the civil rights movement. And it was that collective leadership based upon the respect for the elders that made it work. And when the senior elder, or it wasn't the senior elder, but the respected elder, Dr. King, was removed, then the rest of the elders did not keep that. So again, I can't help but believe if we try and refocus ourselves on this thing that we would define as African civilization, which is defined through our culture, our languages, our artistic creations, specifically our religion, our spirituality, our methods of leading, our social constructs. If we focus on African civilization and try and define that and reinstill that in all our institutions, ultimately we'll win. But if we construct an African revolution based upon the Western mode of leadership and goals, then perhaps we may win and lose our core essence.
We'll win if we use that.
Well, that's the whole purpose of the dialogue that we're engaging in terms of understanding the fundamental philosophical worldview that we have, and then try to start operating from that perspective is the solution to the problem.
And so then that brings us back to point of origin, that Western civilization is stolen, and once it was stolen, was bastardized from African civilization, true African civilization.
Yes.
Exactly what he said.
Yes.
Richard Earth says the exact same thing. How you must change your mode of thinking from Eurocentric back to the way you did originally. But the only way you can do that, they can, what he says, who are you? Are you really who you are, and are you all you ought to be? And the only way you can answer that is to struggle against that which is stopping you from becoming what you should be. Struggle makes you great, struggle wears the weak ones down. You don't give in to temptation.
So you got to identify those things.
Right, you have
In other words, you got to have a plan.
Right, you have to have a plan.
See, and then you work on that basis. So if you do that, it's not a matter of leadership as much as it is having management to manage the plan. You see, and then you can't take one person out and lose everything.
Right.
Yeah.
You see, so that's learning the lesson from the past. Says that that's what we should be about, developing a plan that's going to withstand all of these other things.
Well, you know, like a principled approach, yes, because if the example we gave, if the core group was that team had operated based upon principles,
Right.
as opposed to just inspirational leadership, then they would have been able to maintain the operation after that particular person passed on, because they would have operated off the principles upon which it was operating, and not just from this personality. That's why I ended up saying our major problem is personalities, which is an illusion. The personality ain't even real. Even King himself was just expressing a philosophy.
You're right.
That was the basis for which he did his activity. So the issue should have been the philosophy as the foundation, and the person is just an expression of that. Just like that got me back into the principles of organization of African-American unity in terms of the principles that became the foundation from which Malcolm X was moving from.
Yes.
And so if people are talking about Malcolm X, great, then follow the principles that he articulated. The same way people talk about their Christians, but they don't follow the principles of the person they say they follow. So it's all bullshit. Really come down to it. You know, it's a herd. The herd being conditioned, they follow it, you know. So anyway, let's get here.
Yes. Just to cap this, getting back to the racism, a good example of why racism can exist and why it can flow like it does. You see, it appears to be leaderless, and that's because it's been inculcated into the culture. So you see, it's what a person does. And because of that, anyone you can kill any of them, move them out, and somebody else steps in, and it keeps on ticking. See, because it's systemic, it is institutionalized. That's right.
It's a Western construct.
That's right, and we need to do the same thing. Get us a plan that will allow us to function, to keep on ticking.
The plan is already here. Like I said, the leaders have already been here and left us the plan.
They sure have. Right.
We just haven't been obedient. You know, we hard-headed. That's basically the problem. We hard-headed. We want to do it our own way. We just like kids.
We don't even know what we want to do.
We want to do it our own way. As opposed to saying, but yet we hold these individuals up in great esteem. Oh, Martin and Malcolm and Garvey. You know, we say, oh, these people are so great. But we don't do what they say.
So we lack.
That's the same old Western bull.
Yeah, you're right.
Declaration of what, independence, human rights, all these nice words, but then your life,
That's right.
it's contradiction to that. And I'm gonna say you're not gonna be perfect. I ain't perfect. It ain't about being perfect. It's about being effective and being sincere in terms of where you're moving.
Yeah.
This is real quick, I just want to say something. Real quick, I just want to make a point.
Ain't doing nothing, Jesus.
I know I'm not saying that this is difficult for me to say because in a way, when this statement is made in the past, I've been jumped by my own so-called freedom fighters and cadres and stuff to that nature. In the past, dealing with exactly on that point, there's a certain individual in Los Angeles that I kind of had learned to get rid of dealing with the personality and listening to the message.
Right.
And his name is Kareem. And what happened was that in secret, when nobody's looking, I'm reading his books and listening to the tapes.
Wait a minute, man. Let me cut this tape off. Cut this off. I don't want this off the tape, bro.
Check this out. Please don't jam me up.
But just look at the reaction.
But this is the reaction everybody's having.
Y'all are flunking the test.
We're laughing at you.
The point I'm making is that he was, in a way, I understood the whole understanding of cultural nationalism because we're doing it. His argument was that they were revolutionary nationalists and it was about no education. And then what are we going to do? Are we going to act and behave the same way the European did? So then I was looking at that and that caught my attention and I started to look at the value system and the principles that we were dealing with as far as an African consciousness and having that first. Now, I'm saying I don't believe he's following it himself, but I believe he's putting it out there.
Right.
So I'm actually listening and thinking about what his arguments were, and his arguments were something about what we're doing today. I think he won in a lot of ways that we behave as far as our names, our changing of our value system, and against the so-called revolutionary nationalism of a time of no education. We're just going picking up a weapon and defending ourselves in our communities. But I'm just saying, I had to put that personality aside and try to look at what the message was all about.
Right.
And everybody looked at me when I said it too, didn't they?
That was the right thing to do.
Well, first, I thought you were going to say a line got everybody. But I'm glad you clarified that point, brother.
All right, let's move forward here. I want to get this stuff in your brains. So the first sheet I handed out is dealing with the egg, the psychic egg. And it kind of relates in somewhat in an indirect way with the central constitution of humans and the 7 levels of consciousness. So you have the first level is 1, the lower unconscious. This contains the elementary psychological activities that direct the life of the body, the intelligent coordination of bodily functions, the fundamental drives and primitive urges, many complexes charged with intense emotions. Based upon when those basic drives are obstructed, then the obstruction can create a complex. If you keep denying someone of food, then that eventually creates a complex. Each time the denial happens, the individual has to hold that. They have to hold it, and that energy becomes, it's almost like it's bottled up. It's like it goes to the unconscious mind. So if you keep doing it over a significant numbers of times, it will each of those experiences constellate, or what they call creates a cluster. And after a critical mass of those negative experiences, that cluster becomes a complex. And then that complex becomes a weak spot in the personality of the individual that can become triggered when they encounter that event in their life, in the outer world. So say somebody always got, every time somebody said food, somebody slapped them, right? So then you'll hear, after a while, you come and you read the sign food, and you're going to read, this is an extreme example, but it's happening. It's happening every day. Somebody's calling people, you stupid nigga. You can't do shit. 10,000 times. So subconsciously, it's like, stupid nigga, you can't do shit. And so you internalize that.
Yes, you do.
And it starts to lower your level of self-esteem. And so then in your environment, what do you get attention for? You might, hey, you did go to school again for what? Well, it's like, if I just was quiet and out of the way, nobody paid no attention to me. But if I did this, I'm getting attention. So my body's like, well, shit, I'm getting fed.
That's right.
That's energy. And so then, after a while, whatever behavior you have repeated, even if you were spanking them or hollering at them, you give them attention. Because if you holler about negative, or if they do something positive, you just say, oh, that was cool. What's going to get the greatest thing? The negative. So then they're going to go, and the negative is going to be reinforced. Although you say, I said that was cool. But compared to, and so then you just look at all these, and that creates complexes. Unless the person goes through a process where they psychologically go back into their own life, into their own mind, and confront all those negative experiences, and then wrestle with them and transform them by acknowledging why they're there. Where did it come from? And once you put that light on it, you can take that away and then take the energy, because energy will be released. And then you take the energy and you rechannel that energy into whatever positive program you got going. Because you can go down there and release the energy, but if you don't know where to direct it, it'll go over to another complex.
You ever read the codes?
The codes?
Yeah, demon codes.
I've heard lectures for a number of years on the idea of the concept. I haven't read the specific code.
He made a statement that was not directly saying, but his point was every time you yell watermelon time, you know, everybody's ready to get out there and, you know, start dancing and drinking and all this stuff. And it's like a condition.
Right.
And we still have
so you're saying that was just a metaphor?
Yeah.
Okay. Otherwise you could just
disregard it. Yeah, you know, and everybody's ready to, you know, they're ready to, you know what I'm saying, right?
Well, that's an analogy. He's saying anytime it's party time,
right,
people want to go party.
And yeah, we still got that mentality.
Sure we do. So because we still carry the complex of slavery, that we was worked like dogs and didn't get paid, and in the subconscious part of our mind now, we run away from work. Even people like around your house, like you want to give them to help you, especially younger kids, I ain't your slave. Some water. I ain't your slave, I ain't your maid, I ain't your servant. First thing come out of their mouth. Who said you was? Why is you helping me and doing something for me equated with slavery? Well, that's because we ain't came to grips with that whole conditioning relative to work. Black people work in slavery. We don't like to work hard. There's a certain percentage. A lot of black folks work hard. Most surprising. Great people, black people work hard. But a lot of the younger generation, you know, they into the player mentality. And as younger, I would have been saying it urbanized you specifically.
Right.
Start at the top.
Yeah, in terms of like, they don't want to start at the bottom. They want to get over as easy as possible.
Right.
And so if I can manipulate and slide through and get somebody else to do my homework and run a game by the teacher and get over, oh, I'm getting over.
Yeah.
You ain't getting over.
They getting in, getting over.
You getting played.
You're right. Getting played.
That's a condition, yeah. That's a you know, so we still dealing with that.
Prison, call it prison prep.
Prison prep.
Prison prep. Say what?
Prison prep. In prep.
That's right.
Let's go back to this. So he said,
College prep.
many complexes charged with intense emotions, dreams and imaginations of an inferior kind, lower uncontrolled parapsychological processes, various pathological manifestations such as phobias, obsessions, compulsive urges, and paranoid delusions. This is your lower unconscious mind. This is based, and this stuff is based upon basic drives for food, shelter, clothing, and belonging. So that means if you look at the life of people and they're getting negative feedback, negative experiences related to those basic things, that's going to be all this negative. That's where all this paranoia, obsessions, compulsive urges, phobias come from. By not having your basic urges satisfied in a normal way.
That word parapsychological processes.
Right.
Is that what that
uncontrolled.
means?
And you have people that, see, you have people that are like very intuitive, that are very sensitive, that also have premonitions and other things. You got a lot of people in crime, you know. You got a lot of people in business that utilize those parapsychological capacities. There was a study done of a lot of top corporate executives, and there was a central theme that a lot of them relied on, sixth sense, that was above and beyond just the school books, marketing, business management thing. They had a sixth sense that gave them insight in terms of they should move in this direction or follow this and do this. And they actually started developing techniques to cultivate those capacities. You got people in the street that like got that vibe, you know what I'm saying? They be feeling like, yeah, whatever. You know, you got other people that, so what I'm saying is you have that sense is operative. That people are not always conscious of it. On the other side of it, you start getting these drugs and things, you start opening up other things, you start hearing stuff, seeing stuff, you don't know what stuff is stuff, you don't know what it is, and then it can take you out. Plus people get on drugs and they open up, their lower unconscious mind opens up, and the drugs open that door up and they start seeing all these phobias and all these complexes start acting out in their mind, you know, in what they be saying. You can tell how a person is tripped on drugs, how balanced or unbalanced they are. Because people trip, you know, a lot different on the same stuff. You know? They start seeing little green men pop up in the car, they start trying to kill them, you know, all kinds of other people just be chilling. You know, other people get sex crazy, they gotta have this or that, you know, all kinds of stuff. So you can relate all that way, you can go back in their life, you can see what things was happening that molded, that put that stuff in there. Anyway, so that's the lower unconscious, which is related to your basic, primitive and fundamental drive. Then you got the middle unconscious. So this is one of the psychological elements similar to those of our waking consciousness and easily accessible to it. In the inner region, our various experiences are assimilated. Our ordinary mental and imaginative activities are elaborated and developed in a sort of psychological gestation before they're birthed into the light of consciousness. So just below your conscious mind is the middle unconscious, where a lot of the things that you're dealing with, like when you go to sleep or you got a problem and you start doing research and stuff, then a lot of that stuff starts going down to your middle unconscious. And then the next day you wake up or you walk down the street and it'll be like, bam, there it is. You didn't consciously pull that together. It's down there in your unconscious mind, and your unconscious mind is working that stuff. That's why having times of rest and getting rest is very good for mental development, because you have to give your unconscious mind its time to process the data, just like your conscious mind has, because it's a balance. And to where if you don't give your unconscious mind, usually you'll start having weird dreams and other stuff starts happening, and if you don't understand what's going on, you'll think that there's some crazy stuff. But if you would take those images and those symbols and start analyzing them, you can see, well, wait a minute, that means this and that means this, and here's the formula. Solve your problem right there. Anyway, let's move forward. So we got the higher unconscious or the superconscious. So you got the lower unconscious, which relates to your primitive mind, your middle unconscious that's more related to your conscious activities, then you have the super or higher unconscious. From this region we receive our higher intuitions and inspirations, artistic, philosophical, or scientific, ethical imperatives and urges to humanitarian and heroic action. It is the source of the higher feelings such as altruistic love, of genius, and of states of contemplation, illumination, and ecstasy. In this realm are latent the higher psychic functions and spiritual energy. That's why meditation becomes so important, because meditation is a technique that allows you to go in and go up into that area of your conscious and pull information out of that. When you get inspirations, it's from your higher conscious. That's where it's coming from. Now, a genius is a person that has moved or elevated his conscious mind up into that realm, and that's how they operate, because they're always like, out here. Creative people go up and down. A lot of people like to get writer's block. They got separate. They can't go up in there for whatever reason, different reasons. But through different techniques, you develop a capacity to go up in there, and then you bring down creative ideas, inspirational ideas, solution problems, whatever. So the process of initiation elevated your consciousness from the primitive, from the personal to the collective, to where you walk in that state of consciousness 24/7.
What you said, it elevated the collective?
It elevated your consciousness to the superconscious level.
Okay.
To where you live there.
Right.
You became illumined. And it says here, this is where contemplation, illumination, and ecstasy. So when they're talking about nirvana, heaven, samadhi, all that concept are talking about that state of consciousness.
That Christ.
Right. Heru.
Christ mind.
Right. Buddha. It was illumined, right? They actually, what they're talking about is they had went to this state of consciousness. Yes.
I read an article, just what you're saying about John Coltrane. And he made interviews, and how could he, write giant steps, a whole lot of other stuff. He said, before he went to bed, he just asked himself a question. How would I know what I want to sound like, but I don't know how to start it off.
Right.
And he said while in the middle of sleeping, he would just get up and pick his horn up and start blowing. And he would just memorize it, and the next morning he just jotted out.
Right.
And he said that's what broke up his first marriage, because his wife couldn't deal with that. Getting up, 3-4 times a day.
Right.
But he said he just asked himself a question before he went to sleep. Before the morning, he said it didn't come a day, a month, it may take years. But he would still be working on it, and it would come piece by piece by piece. Same thing about Einstein. He would ask himself a question. And like you said, sleep on it. Like most people say, well, I'll sleep on the decision.
Right.
Like you said, before I make a rational decision, I have to really think about it.
Right.
That's like you said, the subconscious is down there, but you want to really be sure.
Right. That's it.
That's deep.
So let's get through this egg. So the next 4, field of consciousness. This term, which is not quite accurate, but which is clear and convenient for practical purposes, is used to designate that part of our personality of which we are directly aware. The insistent flow of sensations, images, thoughts, feelings, desires, and impulses which we can observe, analyze, and judge. So there are all kinds of sensations, images, thoughts, impulses that are also coming into our field when it's not conscious. So what I'm saying is, right as you sit here today, you're also conscious of an extended activity, cars on the street, little conversation and different things like that. But your mind is not focused on it. So you're not conscious that you're conscious of it. It's almost like a speed read. I took an Ellen Wood course. And the main thing they're saying is your mind has a capacity greater than what you allow it to have. You limit yourself by your thinking. So they force you through exercises to expand your perception. Because they say your mind see it. Like I do like this, your mind saw it. But your conscious mind has been conditioned not to accept what it saw. You know, a lot of times you be trying to recall a number, and when you first think about it, it was right. But then your mind said, well, and then you mess it up. And then you go back and look and say, oh, that was right. I did see what I saw. But because you've been conditioned not to have faith in your own self, you then denied that it was true. And this happens at deeper and deeper levels. And once you stop denying that you do have these capacities, then the capacity becomes stronger and clearer.
An example of that, would that be similar to, like I've had dreams and thinking I went down a certain street before, and lo and behold, maybe a month later or 2 months later, I'll pass something and it'll look so familiar to me. It's like I've been there before. Is that similar to what you're talking about?
No. What that is that the past, present, and future all exist in the now.
The collective. Okay. The collective unconscious.
Right. But because the universe is one. Right? It's one. So the past, present, and future are all one. Just like your day today, the activities of today, are one thing. Now this evening, you can look back on this day and see and think about the whole day, right? But as you was doing it, you just was thinking about the piece you was doing. Just because you was just thinking about the piece that you was doing did not remove that it was still one unity. So anyway, what I'm saying is when you dream, you go down into the collective unconscious, which is the unified field upon which all life exists. It's a common foundation for all life, from the beginning to the end. So when you go down, so the question, I have two thoughts. A person was telling me about a young guy who went on a vision quest, and so he was asking this question about, he needed a sign to really validate, where his mind was. So he was going up this hill. This has been 2 weeks ago. And when he went up this hill, he said he was dealing with the issue of death. And when he went up this hill, he met this snake, this cobra. And he said he stopped and looked at the snake. And the snake stopped at him. And then the snake went on. He said in his mind, what this meant for him, the cobra, he was doing depth, the cobra had gave him his life. You know, he interpreted it. But he was saying this sign, he said he had saw the vision of the snake before he met the snake. That's what it was. I say now, so in his mind it was like, oh, it was this sign, right, that happened. Because I visualized this thing and then it happened. But I say, well, what if it was that your mind already knew that you was going to meet the snake? And it just was reflecting what was going to occur. So where you're thinking here's some sign coming, right? Some miracle type thing. In actuality, it is too. Because basically what it is also validated is that you are connected to a greater universe. But the point I'm raising on your question is that you're visualizing this place. But what if in your consciousness it knows that you're going to go by that house? So it's a preview of what's going to happen.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Okay.
Then when you go by the house, because you had the preview, it's familiar to you.
It looks so familiar.
Would that be considered a premonition?
Right.
Deja vu.
Right. Right.
And is that something that you could actually
Build on?
Yeah.
Sure you
Or
can.
develop that
Yes, you
ability?
can.
You want to know, right?
Sleep on. Well, I had a brother elder saying, man, you need to look in to get some numbers for the lotto. Right. You know, we need the money for the culture center, bro.
That'd be a good call. That's a good
Right.
Go ahead.
Of all of the things in the egg, it seems to me that expansion of the field of consciousness should be the primary goal. And of course, once you look at the actual structure of the egg and the way that this is structured for the field of consciousness potentially being able to, through expansion, contact all the other parts.
Right.
Isn't that a very practical way that we can look at this egg and use it? That the expansion of the field of consciousness should be the primary goal?
That's what we're doing. Because you're becoming aware that those different fields of consciousness exist. So you are expanding your field of consciousness.
Just by becoming aware that they exist, then 4 is expanded so that it touches the other lines.
Right. See, the field of consciousness is determined by what you're conscious of. You're in contact with all that. The only thing that limits you is your field of consciousness, which you allow or accept to in your conscious mind. So the whole thing about initiation and what it did is it expanded your consciousness. So it then encompassed the higher levels of consciousness that also then was aware of your lower levels of consciousness, will control the lower levels of consciousness. But now most people don't even understand that they have these complexes in them. And then because they feel or think certain things, they think it's them, as opposed to it has been something that's been conditioned in them. And just because I think it or I feel it doesn't mean it's mine. But because they think a thought and they claim it, then they may act on it. Because, well, I'm feeling angry, so I'm going to be angry. And I'm feeling it. Well, why are you feeling that? Where'd that come from? It could be triggered by a conditioned response. You have a lot of relationships go down the drain because people are conditioned, had certain experiences in relationships. Then they get into another relationship and somebody will say a certain word or act a certain way or body language be a certain way and they have flashbacks, but it's unconscious. Then they get an attitude or start acting a certain type of defensive way or whatever, and then they bias or contaminate the relationship they're in now. And then the same thing occurs, the same outcome happens in this relationship as in the past relationship.
Without real provocation.
They don't understand why. But because you're reacting the same way that you've been conditioned to act. So you get the same results.
You have to drop that baggage.
Right. It's called psychic debris.
But sometimes drop that baggage, You leave yourself open to get hurt.